Okay, hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Steve Mead from Agency Mentors, Crux Careers, and of the ICG. Very warm welcome to all of you to today's Agency Mentors Lettings webinar. I'm joined by some fantastic people today from the industry. I am just going to run through very, very quickly who we've got with us. A lot of them you probably noticed as or you probably know as we go through the proceedings. So today I'm joined by Christian Byfield from the Depository. Christian, aka the Viking. I'm sure many of you have heard of him. Raj Nair from Fixflow, Managing Director of Fixflow. Paul Conway from HMO Specialists Uno. Head of Staff from Spectre and Hello Again. Andy Holstead from Let Alliance, and Peter Fuller, who has got 30 years experience in the letting sector, runs his own consultancy business, and also by four agents, Vicky Bibris from Location, Anne Deckers from Base Property, Andy Mattin from Harrison's in Canary Wharf, and Greg Suman from Martin Gerard Estate Agents. Guys, you're all very, very welcome. We've got a host of questions to get through today. So any of the participants, anybody watching the webinar, if you've got any questions throughout the webinar, then please feel free to use the Q&A down at the bottom. But I think we'll get kicked off. And first question I have from those who have registered is, what should agents be thinking in terms of reactive repairs, both through lockdown and as unlock starts to take effect? Raj.
So, brilliant question, and this is an absolutely huge topic. So you'll have seen the guidance from the government that came out with the new regulations that were laid before Parliament at 9:30 this morning. They had updated the guidance for landlords and tenants, which is slightly misnamed because it also covers letting agents around repairs. And I would expect that to be updated in line with the new step towards unlock. So the starting point is that emergency repairs have been allowed throughout and in fact have been encouraged. But rather than sort of dive into the detail ahead of the new regulations or the new guidance, I think it's worth sort of looking at things from a high level perspective. So unlock is a process. So whether for repairs or for other parts of your business, you should be planning, executing, and then stabilizing. So it's going to go up the levels and I suspect down the levels of unlock as we go. A really tangible thing that I think lots of agents are missing at the moment is a resilience audit. So looking through your supply chain of contractors. So you may use smaller contractors to deliver value to your landlords, but with the expectation still being that 40% of the UK may be ill at any one time. You need multiple points of failure through your supply chain, not just for your contractors, but your general supply chain. One of the key areas that I think has been overlooked is around GDPR. So you will be collecting, I believe, health data on tenants. That is special category data. So do you have symptoms? Are you shielding and the like? That needs to be handled in a very specific way. Guidance is available from the ICO website together with a policy. And then two key points, I think, are, until the new guidance comes out, are signposting. So where you can, refer to primary material, so the government website, gov.uk, and the underlying regulations. And we've also done a lot of webinars with lawyers, so David Smith from JMW Solicitors as an example, and we've talked about repairs and maintenance for about an hour. So if you're interested in the detail, and I know lots of letting agents love the detail for reactive or planned maintenance, go to our website and have a look.
Great stuff, very concise. So what repair trends are you seeing, Raj, people using the Fixflow system?
So it's been a cycle is how I describe it. So initially tenants heeded government advice and took a pragmatic approach as they were encouraged to do so. So we saw emergency repair levels and urgent repairs still coming through at roughly the same velocity and frequency, but non-emergency repairs dipped down. Over the past 3 weeks, as I think people have had enough of, in part, lockdown and also being encouraged by the government to go back to usual, we've seen the non-emergency repair rates creep back up. Which isn't surprising. One of the really interesting points is that quality of life issues such as broadband or audiovisual, so TVs breaking, that has spiked as more people have spent more time at home and is currently trending at about 40% higher than pre-lockdown. We have seen, and I think this is quite an interesting point overall, because it's got to be knocking at for about 1 million homes in the UK across different sectors using our platform. We've enabled our clients to ask do you have symptoms? And going back to the GDPR point, we've got that all covered off for clients. We have seen a week-on-week fall of people with symptoms of about 40%. So I think that when we look at the government stats about sort of flattening the curve, we're seeing that come through, not just generally, but also across the private rented sector.
Cool. Very concise, thanks. And any of the agents got any comment on that? Anybody specifically? Greg, have you noticed any? I mean, you're just on mute, Greg, at the moment. Have you noticed anything specific in relation to what Raj has just had to say there?
In fairness, I concur. I think people have been very sensible, but the general maintenance requests have started sort of slightly creeping up. It's all about prioritising and grading. So yeah, concur with Raj.
Great stuff. Thank you, mate. Okay, so cracking on. So Andy, what is the single biggest risk currently faced by agents, would you say? Andy Halstead.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I would say that in this environment, the single biggest risk that we all face in the marketplace is the tenants failing to pay the rent. I think an unintended consequence of the government's approach to managing COVID-19 has effectively written the excuse book for tenants across the UK if they ever wanted to use it. So we're in a very difficult situation in that ordinarily the whole lettings proposition is dependent upon tenants paying rent, and when they fail to do so, being able to take the appropriate action to either get payment or get possession of the property. And we're in this unprecedented set of circumstances where you just can't do that anymore. So a huge risk to lettings businesses is, of course, rent flow stopping, because if the rent doesn't come in, fees, management fees aren't there either to run the business. So I would say that's the single biggest risk that we face in the current climate. And the actions that we can take to mitigate that are quite difficult, really, and require, I think, leading edge communication and empathy and understanding with tenants. That this is a time to engage with tenants, perhaps like we never have before. Listen, understand what their circumstances are, and do whatever we can, A, to help, and B, to get the rent coming in. If it doesn't come in right now, for good reason, then agreeing appropriate deferred payment plans and what have you to ensure that it does come in at some point. So that would be my short answer to the biggest single risk that I think we all face.
Okay, we were mentioning just before we came on in about rent guarantees and how that's been affected. You know, that's obviously, you know, there's businesses which are going to have massive exposure there. But one question that did come in: when are landlords likely to be able to bring proceedings for rent arrears? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, you know, our business has got significant exposure here. We have around 100,000 properties across the UK where we guarantee the rent. So, you know, it's quite core to our business. The answer to that question is nobody really knows. Currently, as we know, there's a moratorium on possession hearings, and that is supposed to be lifted in June. I suspect that might well get extended, and we just need to keep very close to the information as we receive it. But I don't know the answer to the question, because I suspect that the government will be very concerned about the potential of thousands and thousands of evictions for unpaid rent happening at a particular point in time. And I think that's unacceptable to everyone. So I suspect that there'll be a phasing of it. My prediction would be towards the end of this year before we start to see normal possession hearings taking place. Okay.
Any of the guys want to come in on that? Anybody? No? Okay. So let's move on. Greg, how should letting agents prioritise their time during lockdown?
This question must have come in before
before
today.
It did, to be fair, and it has come in. It came in probably about 10 or 15 people asked this question, so yeah. I thought you were the man to answer it.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely tell you what you should have done up until now, because lockdown is pretty much almost almost over. Yeah, get your house in order. Compliance, we've got less than 3 weeks left before the transition period for the Tenant Fees Act ends. Look at your deposits. Are you holding more than you should? EPCs, yeah, assess, make sure your process and procedures are in place, advise clients, reassure them, obviously have a conversation about tenants who are struggling to pay rent, as Andy covered before. See if you've got any rent guarantee policies that you need to renew. Make sure you do that quickly, because the requirements are changing almost by the day. Grade your properties, those that are vacant, those that are not. But most importantly now, with this morning's announcement, I think you need to look at what you do and how you do it. Assess the risks, put processes in place, and make sure that you are thinking about staff and general members of public before putting profit first. I think everybody who's on this webinar is already in that camp, because obviously you're looking to educate yourself. You are the better agents out in the industry, I think. So focus on that and make sure that you're helping fight the virus. Make sure that you are functioning, helping the general members of public, but doing it in a safe environment.
Sure. I mean, I think we basically all of us have just got to show that much more humility and empathy as to the whole situation. You know, everybody rushing back to work is just not going to work. Just not going to work. Christian, can I come on to you, please? What do you think is the most time-consuming process in the letting cycle, and what can you do about it?
Thanks, Steve. So I mean, we pick apart the agencies every year. I think probably at the very top of that list is maintenance issues. So I would say, you know, having a really good system like Fico, where those can be logged, tracked, resolved quickly, and in the particular climate, obviously any other critical information captured. So I'd probably say that's number one, and that falls under sort of the core performance of a managing agent service. But outside of that, and something that's applicable to all lets an agent does, we feel the end of tenancy process is actually probably the most time demanding. I mean, I know when we sort of researched it in our company a few years ago, we reckoned we were spending on average about 3 hours per tenancy, going from notice to refund. But then it was really interesting, actually. You know, we already had quite a lot of tech in our business, so it was interesting reaching out to the likes of Stephen Brown and some of the other sort of consultants in the space, who sort of reached out to their client base. And, you know, we were getting reports from a lot of agents of them believing they were spending 4 to 5 hours per tenancy. And look, it's probably the worst part of lettings, right? It's at the end of the transaction when, as an agent, you've made your money. Let's be honest. And then, you know, it's that point where really you fall into that no-win middleman situation where you're mediating between money's back, etc. And I think it's the experience for a lot of tenants that really sours their experience of an agency. So, you know, that was really the foundation to us starting the depository, was coming at it from an agency perspective, and really looking to solve two key problems, which was, how do we reduce that workload? Which also we identified about 80% of the work an agent does in that process is just chasing people. You know, chasing a tenant to book the clean, the checkout, chasing the report, chasing your landlord's instructions, chasing, you know, the dialogue back and forward between tenant and landlord, etc. So, you know, not only is it burdensome, it's real low value tasks. So, you know, what we set out to achieve at the depository was to get rid of that 80%. But what we placed with equal importance was trying to resolve the experience tenants have and the way they perceive agents in that journey. Because, like I said, agents often get tarred, and sometimes quite unfairly. I mean, sometimes very justly, I will add that as well. But sometimes very unfairly. I mean, at the end of the day, as an agent, you have to follow your client's instructions. So if you've got a landlord who is being unreasonable, there's not a lot you can do about that. All you can do is make them make them understand they're being technically unreasonable. But so what we really wanted to do in that respect was really try and raise the profile, raise the transparency of the transaction, raise the profile of the agents in that job, and also help tenants understand that it's a transactional process. There is a legal framework and a government guideline and deposit scheme process to what are considered legitimate deductions. So yeah, I mean, that was what we set out to solve, and we're well on our way to solving it. I mean, we recently reviewed it. We reckon we now spend less than 30 minutes per tenancy, down from 3 hours. So huge saving on time there. But what's been really rewarding so far is the feedback we're having from tenants who love it. They know where they are in the process. They know what they've got to do. They know when they get their money back. So yeah, I mean, so far so good.
So is there any way? I mean, the tenants obviously need educating. Is that a fair point? I mean, what advice would you give to everybody watching in regards to actually educating the tenants when it comes to these sort of processes?
So look, I think any agents out there, and like the ones on the panel, out there, I think will know educating tenants is tough. We've
Absolutely.
tried it lots of different ways over the years. We've tried, extensive PDF documents. We were involved with the scheme with a thing called the Tenant's Voice that had these sort of online tutorials that they could do. We've tried a lot of things, and the truth is, Steve, tenants don't really want to learn. All they want to know is they just want the relevant rules to protect them when they need them. And I think, look, if we're honest, that's fair enough. I think most of the agents here on the panel will probably agree, keeping on top of all the legislative framework around lettings, that's a huge part of the role as a letting agent, is staying on top of all of that. It's a lot to take on board, so as an agent, it's a challenge. I think landlords really struggle, but I think in particular tenants, I often say, it's not like we're taught the British law rule book at school, so we know what laws to protect us. And I think it's the same thing with tenants. I don't think they don't want to know the 400 laws that protect them. They just want to know that they're there when they're there. So I think we looked at educating. Educating is quite difficult. So what we do educate tenants in the process, but it's sort of instant learning. So at each key stage, it sets out what that sort of micro part of the process is. So we've broken down the process into sort of 5 or 6 key stages, but then each key stage will have 2 to 6 micro steps to it. And so each step, we break that down. So it's really digestible. And so the tenant gets what they need right there and then. They don't need to go off and visit 20 different websites to educate themselves. It's just there when they need it. But yeah, educating tenants is tricky. So I think we look at more delivering transparency to tenants rather than per se educating them, just giving them the information they need, where they need it, when they need it.
Cool. Okay, because to be fair, they are the first ones to 12 months or 24 months down the road when there's a dispute. They're obviously the first ones on the phone. Andy Mattin, have you, in relation to that, how do you find things? How do you handle situations like that?
Yeah, I think the Christian said, and I particularly picked up on the point there about the sort of educating tenants, also landlords as well. But I think promotion is very important. The word integrity came up before, and humility, but you still have to effectively promote what you're doing and educate your client base, your prospect base, and promote yourself and promote the service that you're providing. I think that's very, very important. In what an agent's role is in the community at the moment in their relative communities.
Sure. And Vicky, up at location, you guys have the culture within the business is fantastic. You seem to have a great rep with your clients, with your people. What is it that you guys do up there to keep both landlords and tenants on side?
It's a really good question. So I think it's got to start from culture, and core values come from the principles of the business. So it starts from the point of hiring based on those values and skills, if they're a cultural fit or not. Skills can be taught, attitudes more important. So you want people that effectively have the same values that you relay. So your team must feel comfortable to share their mistakes as their learning experiences. And if they don't have that confidence or comfortable being vulnerable with you guys, then you'll find that more mistakes will happen, and people just won't be treating their clients in the right way. So if you just work on building that kind of culture first, so ensuring they feel comfortable to share that with you, create a safe space for them to be vulnerable, especially with the principles of the business, you'll find that they'll take an interest in bettering themselves and providing a much better service to your clients anyway. So I think culturally it's going to be really important to shift a little bit, especially within lettings, and make it so that it's service first, and what's important for the tenants and the landlords goes hand in hand. So yeah, I think building that world-class service is going to be absolutely key.
Sorry about that. Not sure who that was. Thanks, Vicky. Cheers. Just going over to the Q&A very briefly. JP Case has asked Andy and the agents, given where we are with rent arrears and COVID, what advice would be given to landlords at this time in respect of pursuing rent, the timescales and practicalities around that, and determining a good starting point for resolution, whether that's payment plan reduction, freeze, or issuing notice with view to eviction? I think we've covered that slightly, but has anybody got any further comments on that?
I think maybe to reiterate.
Sorry, Andy. Go on, Andy. Sorry.
Yeah, but to perhaps reiterate what I said earlier, that I think that the first step is to figure out the tenants that are genuinely in trouble and need help, and those that are making excuses. And I think it's a very different approach depending on the circumstances. There's a straightforward and I think relatively hard line to take with tenants who are refusing to pay rent, but really are not in the circumstances that mean they can't pay the rent. And you got to communicate to get to the bottom of that and understand what the truth of the situation is. But for the majority who are not paying rent right now, I suspect that they are having difficulty. And this is a really good time to empathise and be helpful and support the tenant through that difficult time. And I think by doing that, we'll get repaid 1,000 times over. So this is a good time to agree rent deferment, repayment plans over a sensible period, and what have you. So pursuing tenants for rent when they simply do not have the money is futile, and I think that can be brand damaging. But equally, being strong where you know the tenant has got the means to pay the rent is commercial.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be fair, Greg, you were just going to come in and comment. We were saying beforehand, obviously, it's how we're remembered at the end, when we come out of this. You were just going to comment, Ned, when Andy was talking?
Yeah, to be honest, I agree with a lot of what Andy said. To add to that, really important to establish who cannot afford and who chooses not to and uses this as an opportunity not to pay the rent. I think there's nothing wrong with doing affordability testing, even if it's halfway through the tenancy, to understand. So use a professional referencing company for that. And ultimately, essentially, the landlords have two options. And either of those, before deciding which route to pursue, you have to be empathetic and really get a good understanding about the background. Ultimately, the landlords have got two choices: either reduce the rent for a period of time, or confirm that the rent is due and must be paid. Now, obviously, Arla Property Market have been running a campaign, Keep the Rent Flowing. I'm not going to go into details why it is so important, but it is absolutely paramount. And if ultimately you do decide to reduce the rent, you need to be very clear and keep notes as to whether you are deferring it or waiving it. Because if you are deferring it, it could have a detrimental impact on your rent guarantee policy. If you don't communicate that to the tenant correctly, if you don't keep records, if you don't communicate with the insurers, underwriters, and so forth. So I think clarity is very important, understanding your responsibilities and working with both parties. And to essentially finish off, as you quite rightly said, people forget most things, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And that's how we will be judged at the end of this.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so whilst on that subject, customer service levels, Anne, if I can come to you, what advice would you be giving to the sector based on customer service levels? What has worked well for you at Base Property?
Sure. Hi, everybody. So basically, we started our journey back in 2004, and I think customer service in those days wasn't really on the level that we expect now, whether that is in estate or lettings or any kind of industry. Nowadays, it's used as a magic word, and everybody tries to brandish it about, saying, you know, we offer amazing customer service. It all depends what you consider customer service, obviously. For us at Base, I think what we have learned over the years is that it is first and foremost the team that matters. So you make sure that you invest time and effort into your people, a bit like Vicky was saying about the, you know, the way that location have their company brand and that they look after each other. By installing that confidence amongst your crew, they then will look after your clients. And, you know, it's all about making sure that they are communicated, that they understand the legislation, but also that it is understandable for them. I think in Base, we've done very well over the last couple of weeks. In a difficult time, it's always important to step up. And so I think our communications have been very much on brand there, making sure that everybody knew that they could come to us, which then has also resulted in the fact that over the entire portfolio, I would say there's probably only about 15% of people that are currently having some kind of financial distress. But all of those we have found solutions for. And so to go back on the topic that we were talking about before with regards to rents, with the uncertainty that we have over the coming weeks and months ahead of us, because none of us really knows what is going to happen. With the rent deferrals, what we have successfully managed to do is to say, fine, we hear you, we understand that it is a difficult period. Let's defer the rent, but somehow tie it into a new renewal so that that rent deferral is then paid up over a 12 or 24 month period. So that again, they don't get hit with massive debt after this is all lifted, but it also gives the landlord the security of, I have a tenant who has been looking after my property and who has been coming forward. They haven't just gone hiding, they just haven't stopped paying the rent. They have actually told us what to do. And so, you know, customer service as we knew it before COVID, whereby we looked after the tenants and the landlords, took a complete different turn. We now very much are the empathizers, being there in between the landlord and the tenant, making sure that they both feel heard and that they both feel looked after.
Good point, good point. So, Christian, just briefly, I mean, obviously you're on the panel representing the depository. For those out there, for those of you who don't know, Christian and Anne are actually business partners in Base Property. What are the opportunities that are out there for agents right now? What are the biggest opportunities, do you feel?
So I think a huge opportunity right now, and it's nothing that hasn't already been talked about the last few weeks, is the opportunity to really reinvent your business, right? It's yes, we've got this announcement this morning that, you know, lockdown is starting to ease and we're starting to lift things, but, you know, make no mistake, no one's opened their doors today to 2,000 applicant inquiries demanding a viewing today. That's, you know, this is going to be incremental as agents figure out how they facilitate it, and also applicants feel comfortable getting out and actually viewing property. So the release of lockdown, combined with the extension of furlough to the end of October, and the fact that there's going to be that flexibility to have part-time staff as well, you know, there is no better time to really look at your entire lettings process, top to tail. Everything from prospecting properties and acquiring applicants all the way through to concluding a tenancy and deposit alternatives. You know, whatever it is, you know, what you should really be doing now is, you know, testing how much you can achieve with as little as possible. You know, there are some amazing products out there, some of them on the panel here, others in the ICG, you know, group, and also outside of that as well. You know, there really is such a broad spectrum now. And look, if you're the MD of a company and you don't really get tech, or you just find it a bit alienating, find people in company who you do. It doesn't matter if they're an intern. It doesn't matter if they're a lettings director. It doesn't matter who they are, really. Someone who gets tech, someone who understands the customer journey. You know, why not create a little sort of team within your company whose sole purpose is to sort of knock their heads together and think how you guys can reinvent yourselves as an agency. How can you be as efficient as possible? How can you deliver that really seamless journey, whether it's a landlord or a tenant? It doesn't matter. Yeah, I think, I don't want agents to think, this has been talked about, like I said, I'm not saying there's opportunity. I'm not the first person to say this in the last 7 or 8 weeks. But I just want to caution other agents into thinking, well, hold on, now lockdown's being released, so now we'll park that. We've done what we can in the last 8 weeks, and we're now just going to rush back to doing things as we did as fast as possible. The market's not going to return overnight. And as we've all touched on, there are all sorts of possibilities we can face. And a very real possibility is that things spike and we go back into lockdown.
Absolutely.
Now, I think as an agent, you have to be asking yourself, if in 2 months' time we go back into lockdown for another 8 weeks, how is your business going to survive? What have you learned from this lockdown that you're not going to put yourself and your customers through next in 2 months' time? And look, we're all hoping and praying that doesn't happen, but it's a very, very real possibility. And whether we're talking about COVID, if you look generally around the conversation around viruses, something like this has been expected for about the last 10 or 15 years. Widely, the medical profession believes that this is not the last we're going to see of something like this. There is likely to be another pandemic within the next decade. So learn your lessons, prepare, and make sure your business is as lean as it can be from an operational perspective, but hopefully that aligns with a really good landlord and tenant journey.
Cool, thanks. Paul, you've been very patient, and Heather and Peter, I will get to you shortly. I do apologise, but Paul, you were nodding away there. Is there anything you wanted to add to what Christian was saying?
No, I think he summed it up really well. I mean, I just admire the guy when he speaks. It's just always so concise. I mean, I think there's definitely value adds from a kind of tech perspective. I mean, I wasn't that techie up until about a year ago, and it scared me. But yeah, as Christian says, if you have the right people on the right subjects, and you're picking your biggest pain point, and then kind of go for it that way.
Okay, so whilst I've got you then, Paul, a lot of agents are going to be focusing on revenue post lockdown. Yeah, have you got any advice for them? Any advice for the guys out there as to what revenue streams they can explore?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot. I mean, there's obviously the main thing is kind of building up your revenue as you kind of come out of this. But I think the key aspect, especially from what we've learned and what we're talking about at the moment in time, I kind of echo what Andy had said around, tenants not paying their rent. Obviously, a lot that we focus on is compliance with everything. We've got many landlords phoning us up at the moment in time, just not being able to get their rent. Now they can't evict their tenants, and now they don't have, and then they can't seem to get a property license either, which is causing further kind of confusion. But yeah, just make yourself safe. Make sure that, same as what Greg was saying, make sure your compliance is in order. This is the time to do it, whether it be anything to do with kind of licensing or planning, or your depository side of things as well. Just make sure those things are in order, because it's going to cause you problems very soon. Once you stop trying to get that revenue, and your problems are going to pile up.
Oh, okay. So, Heather, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Good. So, Heather, we can change track slightly here. Given the changes announced yesterday, what should agents be doing in terms of their prospecting strategy right now, do you think?
Yeah, so I actually think the announcements yesterday have started the clock ticking on what I think is one of the biggest prospecting opportunities you're going to get for a long time with landlords. I think the announcement potentially caught quite a few agents off guard, first of all. So I would suspect that agents across the country right now are coming up with a plan of how they're going to, get themselves back up working again, get the safety measures in place and all of that sort of thing. I mean, we've seen a huge uptick in Spectre activity over the last 2 weeks anyway, but even more so this morning. And I think whilst agents are formulating their plan to get back to work, I think very few of them, or not as many as potentially should have done, will be communicating with their landlords and vendors, but particularly landlords. I think what we have heard a lot of is that there are, and I'm sure, as Greg said earlier, you know, it's probably not the case, particularly with what Anne said as well, with the agents we've got on this call in terms of the lack of communication, but there are loads of agents out there who haven't been communicating at all with landlords. So I think there's a huge opportunity that if you are a good agent and you have got that plan and you are able to communicate not only with your own landlords, which obviously should be a priority, but also with your competitors' landlords, that will be a huge opportunity, because there are worried landlords who want to speak to an expert right now and are not hearing anything. So my advice would be communicate, but get that content right and get it relevant, so that you can explain what you are doing, what safety measures you've put in place, what tech you've got that will allow you to do as much as possible for them. And if you can communicate that to landlords in your area, I think you'll be standing yourself in a very good stead for when things come back properly.
Cool. Good stuff, thanks. Just interestingly, Adam Haggott's just put on the Q&A 45% increase in portal activity between 7 and 8 o'clock today. Also 2,115 properties added to Rightmove in the first 6 hours today, which is really, really, really interesting. Peter, how can I increase the value of my lettings business?
Yes,
$64 million.
I think the answer to that is having acquired a number of businesses, well, many businesses over the years, I think the first thing any seller needs to do is get themselves into a mindset of what an acquirer would pay for. I've sort of got some answers in sort of organic and non-organic way. The first thing to do really was, as your turnover a lettings business, is to move it to as much recurring income as you possibly can. That's really where the value is. We've talked about a volatile COVID-19, and that may well continue, but ultimately it's recurring income. It surprises me what I see in my consultancy. I still see a high level of number of businesses doing let-it only and doing high proportions. It wasn't profitable before the tenant fee ban, I would add, probably, and now post-ban it's even less valuable. So I would think that's one of the number one areas I attack. But of course, there's lots of other recurring incomes which I won't go into now. But it's to try and overall move your as much monthly recurring income is key, and having renewals departments, increasing rents, etc. Although would temper that at the moment. That might it's going like a train, and now it might be slowed down a bit. The other thing I just touched on tech, and I agree with Christian. When I go into businesses, I think business owners are overwhelmed with technology. And what I advise my clients is, does it improve customer service? Does it reduce labour cost? And will it help me grow market share? And if the answer isn't at least 2 or 3 of those, then don't have it. Sometimes there's so much tech out there that's trying to solve problems that don't even exist. So I think there's lots of good examples out there, and I'd encourage business owners to keep asking that same question. And also from there, once you've locked all that down, is to really look at your systems and processes. I think one of the big problems in lettings business is there's so many pieces of legislation. It can be quite frenetic at times. Is to really lock down your processes start with your customer first. What does that look like? Because those customers are going to be, they might be tenants today, they're going to be potential landlords and buyers in the future. So that's identify that. And also make sure your touch points are friendly and inviting. Traditional estate agents, I think, should use their premises more, invite people more into the environment. And once you've built rapport and trust, then there's opportunity to sell additional services that have value for them. At the same time, you've got to keep the integrity of your brand going. I think there's plenty of opportunities to improve. I think Anne said the communication, sometimes the systems and the people in the business don't always link up very well. I think so I'd spend a lot of time in that area to make it customer friendly. And lastly, if you really want to achieve all of those things, is to move away from a traditional model, how people get paid. Most businesses I still see largely pay the negotiators on new business, or they pay on banking. Well, you need to be a bit more creative than that, you know, have incentives and reward structure that reflect, you know, those basic changes. You know, pay more people more if they do a fully managed property with a rent guarantee than you would if someone went out and did a £500 let only. You know, you've got to really stretch targets and stretch people and get the right behaviours in place. The non-organic side is, I think, it's going to be a real opportunity going forward. Is we're seeing lots of concessions. You know, and agents are, you know, I think Christian said, you've got to look to what the future adds. And so many people are carrying on with their business. They don't have the money to reinvest. Maybe look at, you know, a competitor in your town. Maybe there might be a better future by combining with one of your competitors in what I call a soft merger. You know, go from 2 premises to 1 premises. You know, one might be stronger on sales than others, and maybe put that together, and the 2 parts together are worth more. So I think that's something that that should be considered. Failing that, you know, for agents, and there's plenty out there that are, you know, really good market share, got strong balance sheets, is they'll be looking to expand. I would say the one thing we've learned now is it's not a good idea to go and open up a chrome and glass brand new location. I think there'll be plenty of opportunities to buy trading businesses now as part of your expansion, and that comes with a lettings book, comes with a reputation, comes with staff. I think that would be an area I'd concentrate on the basis that, you know, my balance sheet is stronger.
Cool. Peter, I want to come back to that in a minute with you, but I just want to run around the agents for those guys out there, the let only lets that you've got within your business. Can any one of you, or just all of you, just give us one tip to the guys out there? Converting people from let only to managed tenancies. Andy Martin first, put you on the spot. You're on mute, mate. Cheers.
Maybe the wrong person to answer this, because I actually don't offer an introduction only service. It's worked amazingly for me for years now, and I'm running at a portfolio 98% is being collected, the rent's being collected. So just remove the service. I mean, in answer to your question, in terms of conversion, I mean, I think that just depends on case by case, doesn't it? But case studies I found really successful. You know, sometimes, particularly in a time like this, you know, landlords are struggling for rents. It's a good opportunity to example positive case study where, you know, the difference between how a client that you've managed has and how you've aided them through what has been a very difficult process, you know, compared to people that haven't had that sort of vital sort of management service and haven't had the same sort of a positive outcome.
So if I came to you and said, look, I've got a let only, I've got 4 or 5 let onlys, and that's the service I want, how would you convert me? Basically by using those case studies.
That's just one way we do it, but effectively, I mean, you know, I think it came up earlier. We spoke about the, you know, 150 pieces of legislation that a landlord would need to, you know, that needs to be a landlord to comply. And you know, who realistically wants to manage that when you think the difference in fees isn't extraordinary? It's usually fully tax deductible. You're in a high tax bracket as well, then, you know, it's only really usually costing people an extra 60%. So would depend case by case on the objection, but I would just try and understand the client's motives and help educate them into understanding that, you know, the value of management versus, you know, taking on the management yourself.
Cool. Okay, I'll come round to all of you guys. Vicky, I think you put your hand up just now.
Yeah, I mean, we've been having this discussion over the last few weeks now, and we're going to be moving away from let onlys altogether because we're just no longer comfortable with the risk on both the landlord and the tenant that we introduce to that property. And Andy's right, I think it's about 172 bits of legislation now. The risk is just far too great. And ultimately, you want to make sure that if you're putting tenants who are also our clients and we care about into a new home, you want to make sure that they're going to be protected moving forward, as well as the landlord. So it's time to put a stop to the onlys and just take control more of the tenancies and manage those tenancies as effectively as you can, just to make sure everyone's safe.
Cool. Anne?
Well, it always comes back down to that customer service and adding value to your client. Now, it's a long-term relationship. You don't do that in a few months or a few years. Some of our clients have been with us for over a decade. And sadly to say, it is when something really goes badly wrong that they realize, oh, I should have done this or I should have done that. And that's when you step up to the plate, and that's where your reward comes in. So yeah, play the long game, but always make sure that you keep adding the value throughout the years. Just little things, reminding them of their gas safety. A new legislation comes out, sending out communications throughout your entire portfolio saying, hey, you might not know, but this is about to hit. If you have any questions, come to us. Oh, by the way, we can introduce you to a contractor that can do this. Even though you're not managing their property, you are still looking after them. And so when they then in their own lives getting too busy with children or business or whatever, they will eventually bring it, because it is once they have enough money to pay for the agency that they will normally bring it to you.
Cool, sound advice. And Greg, finally?
Yeah, so firstly, we've successfully done that since the tenant fees ban. We've gone from the majority of tenancies on let only to majority where we are collecting the rent. I think the first step that we needed to take, and it was a very scary one, make the let only option more expensive than the alternative. It sounds really simple. It's very, very scary, trust me. But if you stick to your guns, it works. The other thing is, when a landlord is still insisting, vet them like you would a tenant. Give them scenarios and ask them questions. How would you deal with, and give them a scenario. And you can very, very easily pull this apart and demonstrate to them that they're not quite ready to self-manage yet. You don't need to belittle them. It becomes painfully apparent as soon as you ask quality questions. And then sell it as a package, which is quite similar to how mobile phone operators work. Sell it as a tariff, where it can be cheaper to do something, although you're getting a lot more in return than something that you're used to. People don't like change, but it's our job to sell it in a way that we talk about things relevant to them rather than what's relevant to us.
Okay, fine. So universally, I think if we sort of did away with let only, I think that's probably the easy answer, isn't it? Peter, just coming back to you. Obviously, there are going to be many casualties within the sector, having gone through what we've gone through recently. So, would you say that now is a good time to acquire a lettings business, another lettings business?
I think it is. I mean, when people, as Warren Buffett says, when people retreat, sometimes it's the best way to go forward. I think that larger, multiple agency, big corporates, they will need to continue acquiring. And I think that, you know, I track lots of businesses, and you can already see that some are in a distressed state, which doesn't even take into account the trading for the last couple of months. So I think there will be opportunities, but you have to, you know, you can do it on what I call spreadsheet management. You can do all the things I've said, but I think the other thing to consider is culturally, would they be a good fit? I think those things, that's where it can go horribly wrong. You know, the values of your company, your brand within that location, and all those things you should ask yourself. But essentially, you could be, if you're looking at an exit strategy, as an example, if you've been trading your business 20, 30 years and you want to get out, actually being a bit braver, acquiring a business, increasing your profits. Any acquirer is going to give you, going to look at your profits, and sometimes by simply doing an acquisition, you can change the trading, you can make your business far more attractive. The skill is finding the right acquisition. But yeah, certainly I think now will be an ideal opportunity, because organic growth, that's the other thing at the moment, is I haven't met an agent that's really growing substantially. Well, so, you know, doubling every couple of years organically. I'm not really seeing anything like that. At best, most agents are sort of standing still.
Okay. So Pete, Jill Garvey's just asked you specifically, how would you go about approaching letting agents to see if they'd sell?
Well, I'm bound to say use somebody independent, such as me. Because if you write to, I know from experience, my time at Romans, I used to spend a lot of time approaching agents to acquire them, and in a lot of ways, it comes across very aggressive, very arrogant approach. I think the sensible thing is to have a plan. Where do you want to be? And not just me, other people. You would target businesses. You can look at their website. You can go online to Companies House. You can see the age of the proprietors. The older they are, the more likely they are to be selling, and obviously local knowledge plays a huge part. And get them to engage with you initially, and take it from there. You know, people are always interested in knowing what their business is worth.
Absolutely. Okay, Jill, hope that answered your question. So moving over again slightly, Andy Holstead, with new transaction levels so low, how are agents generate incremental revenue streams? How can agents generate incremental revenue streams?
I think it's a crucial question, especially at a time like this. And I guess there's three scenarios at the moment. You either want to stay as you are, you want to sell your business, or you would prefer to acquire another business and bring it into your own. Any of those scenarios will benefit by driving up significant new revenue streams. I've come to understand agents quite well over the years, and they are typically brilliant administrators, and very good at delivering customer service. One of the problems with lettings is the revenue streams are, too much of the revenue comes from fee-based or recurring activities, so from management fees off rent or whatever, which lends itself to the businesses being very good at customer service and customer retention, but not necessarily great sales businesses. And I think the fee ban brought this very much into focus, in that tenants all of a sudden are not a source of revenue unless we're able to sell things to them. Can't charge tenants fees anymore, obviously. And if you look at the split of revenue that goes into a typical letting agency business, then it's no more than 20-30% of total revenue comes from new transactions. The rest of it comes from the existing book of business. So if you think about that, and then just ask yourself the question of an agent, as an agent, how much revenue do I generate from the 100, 200, 300 properties that I manage every month that is not associated with a management fee? And you arrive at a relatively small number. And yet we have the opportunity to communicate with and engage with literally hundreds of consumers in our tenant customer base. And if we look at, as an agent, if we look at our communication plan with agents, with tenants, sorry, how often do we proactively communicate with tenants and offer them goods and services that they would benefit from during their tenancy? I suspect it's not very often at all. And yet they are significant consumers. So the first thing I would do to drive up revenue streams at a time when new transactions are relatively low, and in fact, in any event, revenue coming from new transactions is only a small part of the total, would be to figure out, how do I engage with my tenants and get them to buy things from me that they will benefit from, and so will I. And we hear a lot about technology, customer journey, and customer experience. People like people, and people love world-class customer service. And if you offer those things, then they are very inclined to buy from you. And that's where I would start.
Okay. And to be fair, a colleague of mine, Stephen Brown, who you all know, has always said your current database, your existing database, is absolutely gold. I mean, there is so much.
But tenants living in properties that we manage, that's not a database, they're customers.
Exactly, yeah. No, I get your point. Okay, so finally, last question. Vicky, what could agents do to improve the culture in their business, and how can they add value to landlords to create further long-term relationships with landlords?
Good question. So that I said earlier that the culture and sort of core values come from the principles of the business. So your team, as long as you're keeping it effectively fun and taking an interest into what their aspirations and interests are, taking a genuine interest in that person, understanding them and what their plans and goals are, so that you can help them create their own visions and plan for them, and really focus on the personal, professional development of that person, you start to build super, super strong relationships and give them the perfect example as to how they should treat not just their colleagues, but their clients as well. So that on the cultural front is key. Keeping it fun, I suppose, given that we spend more time with our colleagues, or we did, than we do our family, it's important to make sure that people want to come to work and are excited by it. I hate the thought of people dreading coming to work, and I think you should avoid that at all costs. I think if people dread to come to work, one, they're not going to stay for very long, so it's not very business savvy, and they're not going to be providing your clients with a world-class service, not in the slightest. So that's important. I think as the leaders of the business, there's a huge responsibility to set a better example and lead by that example as well. I've noticed and seen so many agents sort of mimic their hard boss, you know, and that comes across and translates into how they communicate with their clients and their colleagues. So set the best example, lead by example, and a great leader understands that they work for their team, not the other way around. So that's really important, and they'll only grow as much as we do. So once you have that kind of ethos within the business and everyone's on the same page and have the same values, you then find that that relays and translates as to how we treat our landlords and all clients. So there's a lot of value to be added to landlords, but I think ultimately it has to come from sort of echoing what everybody else said, through communication. Don't just get in touch with them when something goes wrong or when you want something from them. I think communicating during the whole process, talking to them about the legislation changes, and doing something nice for them every once in a while. We are all, I think, understand the art of reciprocity, but good givers are great getters. And sometimes the smallest gesture will go the longest way. And it depends on what kind of relationships you're looking to build. But if they're strong, long-standing ones, from people that will refer you and scream from the rooftops as to how great you've been, it has to start from that. But without the right values within the business, it's not going to work.
Cool. Okay. And fantastic business you've got up there. Location. Guys, just before we finish, just wanted to run round the agents. Obviously, with the announcements yesterday and today, we're able to open the doors. Can I just run round and just ask you, what advice or what will you be doing, so that the audience can get a feel for what's going to go on? Greg?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I completely agree with what Vicky said. It's very much what we believe in as well. I think putting people before profit is as important as ever now. We've got a great opportunity to kickstart the economy, but that comes with a huge responsibility to do it in a safe manner. So I think my message to everyone is be sensible, put people before profit, and think how you can work with them, because ultimately we all want the same thing.
Cool. Anne, briefly.
On Friday already, when we had our weekly drinks through Zoom with the crew, we said to all of them, regardless what is said on Sunday, we don't expect you to be there on Monday. That ended up being Wednesday. Lucky we've been set up for a long time as a prop tech company, and we all work very happily from home and have kept it going. So yeah, same as Greg and Vicky said, keep your staff safe, keep your clients safe.
Good. Andy Madden?
Yeah, absolutely echo all of that. And use the technology that's out there. Use the tech, use the tools. They do work. And yeah, echo what everyone says, stay safe, treat people first, and prioritize the people over the profit.
Absolutely. Guys, for you out there, you will appreciate that everybody on this call from the suppliers side of things are members of the ICG. The ICG was formed last year basically to try and get through the minefield, which is the prop tech industry out there. It's there's a lot of products out there. We like to think that the 30 or so companies that are associated with the ICG are best in class. There's certainly more companies out there that we would encourage to talk to us about becoming members. But the ICG website, icgapproved.co.uk, you can get a host of information regarding all our products and services, all our members. So please go on there, have a look. We're running weekly webinars next Tuesday. If I'm honest, I can't quite remember what the actual subject is. Christian, can you remember what Tuesdays is?
put me on the spot there, Steve. Thanks for that.
I thought you knew everything.
I'm glad I pulled you into that belief as well.
Listen, it doesn't matter. It's all the information, all of the events, all webinars that we've done recently, all the recordings are on the ICG website.
I think it's sort of life after lockdown or something, isn't it? I seem to think it's.
I think it is life after
life forward after lockdown or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So please come and join us on Tuesday. As I say, go to the website. You've got all the information there. I'd like to thank everybody on the panel, the agents, for their contributions this morning, and the suppliers. Thank you all, guys, and thanks to everybody out there for watching. Hope you've enjoyed the session, and stay safe. We look forward to seeing you all soon. Cheers.
Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.